The billionaire who paid me $50,000 to erase his child just gave that child a scholarship. He handed her a crystal trophy with his own hands and told her she reminded him of someone special. My daughter has no idea she's standing in front of her father. And I have exactly 1 week before he figures out those green eyes staring back at him are his own. 14 years of silence is about to explode in a room full of cameras. And I'm the only one who sees the bomb ticking. I was folding laundry when my entire past walked back through the front door. Not literally. Not yet. It came in the form of a cream-colored envelope with gold embossing, the kind of stationery that whispers money before you even open it. Tanya dropped it on the kitchen counter like it was on fire, her hands shaking, her eyes wide and gleaming with something I hadn't seen in years. Hope. Mom, she breathed. Mom, I won. I looked up from the pile of mismatched socks, because of course that's what I was doing when my carefully rebuilt life started to crack, and saw her holding that letter like it was made of glass. Won what, baby? She could barely get the words out. The Wright Foundation Scholar of the Year. My hands stopped moving. The sock I was holding, one of hers, blue with little robots on it, slipped through my fingers and hit the floor. Wright Foundation. Kenneth Wright. The name I hadn't spoken out loud in 14 years landed between us like a grenade with the pin already pulled. What did you say? Tanya didn't notice the way my voice had gone flat. She was too busy reading from the letter, her words tumbling over each other in breathless excitement. It says I've been selected from over 3,000 applicants nationwide. There's a full scholarship, mentorship opportunities, access to the robotics lab at Wright Dynamics headquarters, and, she looked up, her green eyes shining. Those eyes. His eyes. Mom, they want to meet me. There's a reception next Friday. It says here that Mr. Kenneth Wright himself requested to congratulate the winner personally. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except stare at my daughter, my brilliant, beautiful, fatherless daughter, holding an invitation from the man who paid me to disappear. If you've ever spent 14 years building a life on silence and sacrifice, only to watch it unravel in 30 seconds, you know the feeling I'm talking about. That cold, sinking dread that starts in your chest and spreads like frost through every nerve in your body. You know what it feels like to realize the past doesn't stay buried just because you want it to. Let me take you back. Not all the way, not yet, but far enough that you understand why that name made my hands go numb. Kenneth Wright wasn't always a billionaire. When I met him 15 years ago, he was a rising tech genius, with a one-bedroom apartment in the city, a coffee addiction, and a vision that made venture capitalists write checks with shaking hands. He was building Wright Dynamics from the ground up: robotics, automation systems, AI integration, and I was a young architect working on the design for his first headquarters. We were both hungry, both young, both convinced we were going to change the world. I fell in love with him in about 3 weeks. He fell in love with his company in about 3 days. For almost a year, I thought I could live with that. I thought ambition and love could coexist. I thought, when he looked at me the way he did, like I was the only person in the room who understood him, that it meant something permanent. Then, I got pregnant. And I learned exactly how permanent I was. Mom? Tanya's voice pulled me back to the present. She was staring at me now, the excitement on her face dimming into confusion. Are you okay? You look pale. I forced my hands to unclench. Forced my lungs to pull in air, forced my face into something that resembled a smile. I'm fine, baby. I'm just surprised. This is huge. I'm so proud of you. And I was. God, I was so proud of her I could barely stand it. Tanya had spent the last 4 years building robots in our garage with scavenged parts and YouTube tutorials. She'd won regional competitions with inventions held together by duct tape and sheer determination. She'd taught herself coding, engineering, physics, all while I worked 2 jobs just to keep us in a neighborhood with decent schools. She earned this. She deserved this. But the man offering it to her? He didn't deserve to be in the same room as her. So can I go? Tanya asked, her voice small now. Uncertain. To the reception? Every instinct I had screamed no. No, you can't meet him. No, you can't walk into that building. No. You can't stand in front of the man who looked at me 14 years ago and said, Evelyn, I can't do this. Not now. Please, let me handle this the only way I know how. And then he handed me an envelope. I can still feel the weight of it in my hands. The way the paper was too smooth, too expensive. The way his signature looked at the bottom of that check, cold, impersonal, like he was approving a quarterly budget instead of paying me to erase his child. I never cashed it. I kept it, folded in the back of a drawer, underneath old bills and photographs I couldn't bear to look at. A reminder, a scar. Proof that Kenneth Wright valued his empire more than he valued me. More than he valued us. But here's the thing about being a mother. You swallow your own pain when your child's future is on the line. You smile when you want to scream. You say yes when every part of you wants to say no. Because Tanya didn't know. She didn't know that the man whose foundation just validated every hour she spent hunched over circuit boards in our garage was the same man who made me feel like I was a problem to be solved. A mistake to be erased. She didn't know her father existed. And I'd spent 14 years making sure of it. Of course you can go, I heard myself say. Tanya's face lit up like sunrise. Really? Oh my God, Mom, thank you. I have to call Jessie, she's going to freak out, and I need to figure out what to wear. And she hugged me so hard I felt my ribs compress. Then she was gone, racing up the stairs to her room, already on her phone, her voice bright and buoyant, and filled with a kind of joy I hadn't been able to give her in years. I stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by half-folded laundry, and the ghosts of a past I thought I'd outrun. And I wondered how long I had before Kenneth Wright looked at my daughter and saw himself staring back. You know what I've learned from carrying a secret this heavy for this long? The women who understand who've hidden truths to protect the people they love, they don't judge the silence, they understand it. That's what this space has become. A place where we share the stories we couldn't tell anyone else. The ones that make us human. If you're here because you recognize that feeling, because you've lived your own version of this, stay. You're not alone in this. None of us are. That night, after Tanya went to bed, I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I Googled him. Kenneth Wright's face filled my laptop screen. Older now. Sharper. The boyish softness I remembered long gone. He stood on a stage at some tech conference, mid-speech, one hand gesturing toward a screen behind him that showed sleek robotic arms assembling car parts with inhuman precision. The caption read, Wright Dynamics CEO Kenneth Wright unveils breakthrough in automated manufacturing, stock surges 40%. There were other photos too. Kenneth at charity galas. Kenneth shaking hands with senators. Kenneth on the cover of Forbes under the headline, The Billionaire Who's Automating the Future. He'd done it. Everything he said he would do, he did. He built his empire. And I built mine one shift at a time, $1 at a time, one scraped-together birthday present at a time. I didn't regret it. But God, it hurt to see how easy his life had been without me. The email arrived 2 days later. It came from someone named Blanca Herrera, executive assistant to Mr. Kenneth Wright, and the subject line made my stomach drop. Wright Foundation Scholar Reception, parent attendance required. I clicked it open with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Dear Miss Lashley, we are thrilled to inform you that your daughter, Tanya Lashley, has been selected as this year's Wright Foundation Scholar. This is an exceptional honor, and we would be delighted to celebrate her achievements with you. The reception will take place on Friday, March 14th, at 6 p.m. at Wright Dynamics headquarters. Mr. Kenneth Wright has personally requested the opportunity to meet Tanya and her family. He was deeply moved by her application and would like to discuss her mentorship personally. We hope you can join us for this special evening. Warm regards, Blanca Herrera. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop, walked to my bedroom, and pulled open the bottom drawer of my dresser. Beneath old tax returns and faded birthday cards, I found it. The envelope, still sealed, still crisp, still carrying the ghost of a moment I'd spent 14 years trying to forget. I didn't open it. I already knew what it said. But I held it in my hands and thought about the girl I used to be the one who believed love was enough, who thought Kenneth would choose us, who walked out of his penthouse that night with nothing but a broken heart and a baby he'd never know. And I thought about the woman I'd become. Stronger, harder, a mother who would walk through fire for her child. Even if that fire was a man in a suit who once made me disappear, Friday came faster than I wanted it to. Tanya spent the week in a state of barely contained euphoria, researching Kenneth Wright, like he was a celebrity she'd been waiting her whole life to meet. And in a way, I guess he was. She didn't know she was researching her own father. I bought her a dress from a consignment shop downtown, deep blue, simple, elegant. It was the nicest thing she'd owned in years, and when she tried it on, she looked so much older than 14 that it made my chest ache. "Do I look okay?" she asked, turning in front of the mirror. "You look perfect," I whispered. And she did. She looked like the future Kenneth and I might have had if he'd been brave enough to want it. We arrived at Right Dynamics headquarters just after 6. The building was glass and steel and ambition towering, cold, flawless. The kind of place that made you feel small just by standing in its shadow. Inside, the lobby was filled with people in expensive clothes, holding champagne glasses and making conversation that sounded important. Tanya's hand found mine, and I squeezed it. "You've got this," I whispered. She smiled. But I wasn't sure if I was talking to her or to myself. And then I saw him. Across the room, standing near a stage draped in Right Foundation banners, talking to a circle of men in suits. Kenneth, 14 years older, broader in the shoulders, hair just starting to silver at the temples, but the same. God, he was the same. My heart didn't know whether to stop or sprint. And then, as if he could feel my gaze, he turned. Our eyes met, and I watched every ounce of color drain from his face. For 3 seconds, the entire room disappeared. There was no champagne, no laughter, no polished executives discussing quarterly projections. Just Kenneth's face across that lobby shock bleeding through his composed exterior like ink through water. He knew me. After 14 years, a daughter, and a whole lifetime of trying to forget, he knew me instantly. And something in his expression, something raw and unguarded, told me he'd never stopped knowing me. I felt Tanya's hand tighten around mine. "Mom, you okay?" I tore my eyes away from Kenneth and looked down at my daughter. She was watching me with concern, her head tilted slightly, trying to read an expression I was desperately trying to hide. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I lied, just a little overwhelmed. "This is a big night for you." She smiled, but it was uncertain now. She could sense something was wrong. Mothers and daughters, we speak a language that doesn't need words. And right now, mine was screaming. Kenneth excused himself from his conversation mid-sentence. I watched him do it, watched him place his champagne glass on a passing tray without looking, watched him cut through the crowd with the kind of purpose that made people step aside without realizing why. He was walking toward us. Every step closer felt like the walls closing in. I had 30 seconds, maybe less. 30 seconds to decide what I was going to say to the man who paid me to disappear. The man who signed a check instead of signing a birth certificate. The man whose green eyes were staring back at me right now from my daughter's face, and he didn't even know it yet. My heart was hammering so hard I thought Tanya might feel it through our connected hands. "Run," something inside me whispered. "Take her and run." But I didn't. Because running would mean answering questions I wasn't ready to answer. And because God help me, part of me wanted to see what he would say. Kenneth stopped 3 feet away from us. Up close, the years showed differently. There were lines at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there before. A tension in his jaw that spoke of sleepless nights and decisions that weighed more than money. His suit probably cost more than my car, but it couldn't hide the way his hands were shaking. Just barely. But I noticed, Evelyn. My name in his voice after all these years hit like a blow to the chest. Not cold, not distant. Broken. Tanya's head snapped toward me, then back to Kenneth, her confusion deepening. You know each other?" she asked. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What was I supposed to say? "Yes, sweetheart. This is the man who loved me for 11 months and then paid me $50,000 to erase myself from his life. This is your father." Surprise. Kenneth saved me from answering. Or maybe he damned me. I'm still not sure which. "We knew each other," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving mine. "A long time ago." "How long ago?" Tanya pressed. "The way teenagers do when they smell a secret." 15 years, Kenneth said. His voice cracked on the number. I watched him do the math in real time, watched his eyes flick down to Tanya, really look at her for the first time and then back to me. Watched the questions start to form behind his eyes. "No," I thought desperately. "Not here, not now, not like this." "Mr. Wright." A woman in a sleek black dress and a headset appeared at Kenneth's elbow, saving us all from whatever was about to happen. She had a clipboard, a smile that looked expensive, and the kind of efficiency that comes from managing billionaires for a living. "We're ready to begin the presentation," she said. "They need you on stage in 2 minutes." Kenneth didn't move. His eyes were still locked on mine, and I could see the war happening behind them. Shock, recognition, confusion, and something else. Something that looked an awful lot like hope. "Mr. Wright?" the woman repeated, more insistent now. "Give me a minute, Blanca," he said, his voice hoarse. Blanca glanced at me, then at Tanya, then back at Kenneth. Whatever she saw on his face made her nod once. Sharp and professional. "1 minute," she said, "then I'm dragging you on stage myself." She disappeared back into the crowd. Kenneth turned back to us, and I watched him try to pull himself together. He smoothed his tie, straightened his shoulders, became the CEO again instead of the 29-year-old man who'd once held my face in his hands and told me I was the best thing that ever happened to him. Right before he became the man who told me to leave. "You must be Tanya," he said, and his voice was steadier now, controlled. He extended his hand. Tanya shook it, her eyes wide. She wasn't stupid. She could feel the weight in the air between us, the history that was crackling like static electricity. "It's an honor to meet you, sir," she said. "Thank you so much for this opportunity. I've been following your work for years. The automation systems you designed for..." "Your eyes," Kenneth interrupted. Tanya stopped mid-sentence. "Sir?" He was staring at her like he was seeing a ghost. "Your eyes," he repeated, quieter now. "They're unusual, beautiful. That exact shade of green is rare." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. "Don't," I thought. "Please don't." Tanya laughed, uncomfortable with the attention. "I guess my mom says I got them from..." "We should let you get to the stage," I cut in, my voice sharper than I intended. "We don't want to hold up the program." Kenneth's gaze snapped back to me, and I saw the moment it clicked. Not the full truth, not yet, but enough to know something was very, very wrong with the story I'd just told him with my silence. "Evelyn," he said slowly, "we need to talk." "Not here," I said. "Then where?" "I don't know." "Not..." "Mr. Wright." Blanca was back, and this time she wasn't asking. "Now." Kenneth looked at me like a man staring at the last lifeboat pulling away from a sinking ship. "After," he said. "Please. After the ceremony. Don't leave." It wasn't a request from a CEO. It was a plea from the man I used to love. "And God help me," I nodded. Kenneth was ushered away toward the stage, and Tanya and I were guided to seats in the second row by another assistant with a perfect smile and an iPad. The lights dimmed. A presentation began. Glossy videos of smiling scholarship recipients, testimonials about changed lives, statistics about innovation and opportunity. I didn't hear any of it. I was too busy watching Kenneth on that stage, his jaw tight, his movements mechanical. He was giving a speech, something about investing in the next generation, about potential and purpose, but his eyes kept drifting back to where Tanya and I sat. To Tanya. He couldn't stop looking at her. And every time his gaze landed on my daughter, I saw his composure crack a little more. He knew, maybe not consciously, maybe not the full truth, but somewhere deep in his bones, Kenneth Wright knew. The moment they called Tanya's name, everything else faded. My daughter stood and walked to that stage, with her head high and her shoulders back, and I'd never been more proud or more terrified in my entire life. Kenneth handed her the award, a crystal sculpture shaped like a rising star, and shook her hand. And then he did something that made my blood run cold. He pulled her into a hug. Not a professional, congratulatory hug. A real one. The kind of hug you give someone you've been waiting your whole life to meet. Tanya looked startled but pleased. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. And I sat frozen in my seat, watching the man who walked away from us hold the daughter he didn't know was his, like he was afraid she might disappear. When he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes. I saw them catch the stage lights before he blinked them away. The ceremony ended. People began filtering toward the reception area, where tables were laden with expensive hors d'oeuvres and champagne. Tanya was immediately swarmed by other scholarship recipients and foundation staff. She was glowing, radiant, holding her award like it was made of solid gold instead of crystal. I stayed back, trying to blend into the crowd, trying to figure out how the hell I was going to survive the conversation that was coming. "Miss Lashley?" I turned to find Blanca standing beside me, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Wright has requested a few minutes of your time," she said quietly. "Privately. There's a conference room on the 3rd floor, where you won't be disturbed. I should stay with my daughter." "Tanya will be well taken care of," Blanca assured me. "I'll personally make sure she's with the other scholars. This won't take long." She wasn't asking. And I realized with a sinking feeling that Kenneth Wright hadn't built an empire by accepting the word no. Not from investors. Not from competitors. And apparently, not from me. I followed Blanca through a series of hallways that grew progressively quieter. Glass walls gave way to solid ones. The sounds of the reception faded behind us. She stopped in front of a door marked Executive Conference Room C and opened it. "He'll be with you shortly," she said. Then she left me alone. The room was all windows and minimalist furniture, a long table, leather chairs, a view of the city skyline that probably cost extra. Everything in it screamed power, control, perfection. Everything Kenneth had built while I was folding laundry and working double shifts. I stood by the window and tried to breathe. Tried to prepare for whatever was about to happen. But how do you prepare to face the man who broke your heart when he's about to find out you kept his daughter a secret for 14 years? The door opened behind me. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. "Evelyn." Kenneth's voice was different now. No audience, no mask. Just raw, trembling truth. "Is she mine?" 4 words. That's all it took to shatter 14 years of silence. I closed my eyes and answered the question that would change everything. Yes. Here's what I've discovered about truth. It doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It arrives when it's ready, not when you are. The women who've stayed with me through this story, you understand that. You've lived through your own versions of moments when everything changes in a single word. That's why we keep showing up for each other's stories. Because sometimes, the only way through is knowing someone else made it to the other side. If this is resonating with you, if you're seeing pieces of your own life in mine, I'm glad you're here. We're building something here. A place where the complicated stories get told. The word hung in the air between us like a verdict. Yes. For 5 seconds, Kenneth didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. He just stood there in the doorway of that conference room, his hand still on the handle, his face draining of color like someone had opened a valve and let everything drain out. Then his knees buckled. Not completely. He caught himself on the edge of the conference table, his knuckles going white against the polished wood. But I saw at the moment the truth hit him with enough force to take his legs out from under him. 14 years, he whispered. It wasn't a question. It was math. He was counting backward, doing the calculation that would rearrange his entire understanding of his own life. Tanya's age, the last time we were together, the night I left. "You were pregnant," he said, his voice hollowing out. "When you left, when I—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Good. Because I didn't want to hear him say it out loud. I turned back to the window, my arms wrapped around myself like I could hold the pieces together through sheer force of will. "I was 8 weeks along," I said quietly, "when you handed me that check." Behind me, I heard him make a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. "Evelyn." God. "Evelyn. I didn't. Why didn't you tell me?" I spun around, and whatever he saw on my face made him take a step back. "I did tell you," I said, each word sharp and deliberate. "I told you I was pregnant. I told you we were having a baby. And you looked at me like I'd just set your entire future on fire. That's not. You said you weren't ready. You said you had investors flying in. You said you couldn't handle it. And then you wrote me a check and asked me to make the problem go away." My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated myself for it. Hated that after 14 years, he could still make me feel like the girl who stood in his penthouse with her heart in pieces, wondering how love could evaporate so quickly. Kenneth's face twisted. "I thought, Jesus, Evelyn, I thought you were going to. I thought the money was for—" He couldn't say that word either. So I said it for him. "An abortion?" He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I thought you wanted one," he said, his voice breaking. "You took the check. You left that night. You never called. You never came back. I thought." He pressed his palms against his eyes. "I thought you decided you didn't want the baby. That you didn't want me. That I'd ruined everything and you were done." I stared at him. All these years, I'd imagined this moment. Imagined what I would say if I ever saw him again. I'd rehearse speeches in the shower, in the car, In the dark at 3 a.m. when Tanya was sick and I had no one to call. I'd imagined rage, vindication, the satisfaction of watching him realize what he'd lost. But I never imagined this. Kenneth Wright, the billionaire, the genius, the man who'd built an empire believing for 14 years that I'd taken his money and ended our child's life. Believing I'd chosen to walk away. I never cashed your check, I said. His hands dropped from his face. What? I never cashed it. I still have it. In a drawer under my old tax returns. I laughed. But it came out bitter. I couldn't spend it. Every time I looked at it, it felt like selling my own soul. Something in Kenneth's expression crumbled. Then how did you survive? How did you raise her? The same way millions of single mothers survive, I said. 2 jobs, night shifts, community college classes whenever I could scrape together tuition. I didn't have venture capitalists, or board meetings, or a trust fund. I had grit, and a daughter who needed me to be stronger than I felt. Kenneth was shaking his head, his hands curling into fists at his sides. I would have helped you. If I'd known Evelyn, if I'd known you kept her, I would have. Would have what? I demanded. Flown back from your investor meetings? Paused your empire building for diaper changes? You made your choice, Kenneth. You chose right dynamics. You chose ambition. You chose a future that didn't include me or the baby I was carrying. I chose wrong. 3 words. Quiet. Devastated. True. They hit me harder than I wanted them to. You don't get to do this, I said, and I hated how my voice shook. You don't get to show up 14 years later and rewrite history. You paid me to disappear. Those were your terms. That was your decision. And I've regretted it every single day since. That's not my problem, isn't it? He took a step closer, and I saw the rawness in his face, the guilt, the grief, the weight of 14 years of not knowing. She's my daughter, Evelyn. She's God. When I looked at her tonight, something in me recognized her, before my brain could catch up. Her eyes. The way she tilts her head when she's thinking. That little gesture she makes with her hands when she's excited. That's mine, I interrupted. She got that from me. I know, he said softly. She got your strength too, your brilliance, the way you look at problems like they're puzzles waiting to be solved. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. She's extraordinary. And I missed it. I missed all of it. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not for him. Not now. You didn't miss it, I said. You chose not to be there. I know. You handed me money instead of staying. I know. You made me feel like I was a problem that needed to be erased. I know. His voice broke completely. And I will spend the rest of my life wishing I could go back and do it differently. But I can't, Evelyn. All I can do is... He stopped, swallowed hard. All I can do is ask for a chance now, please. Before I could answer, before I could tell him there was no chance in hell or maybe that I didn't know anymore, the door opened. Blanca stepped in, her expression carefully neutral. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't sorry at all. But Tanya is looking for her mother, and the other scholars are gathering for the lab tour. Kenneth straightened immediately, wiping his face with the back of his hand and pulling the CEO mask back on. It didn't fit quite right anymore, the edges were cracked, the composure forced, but he managed. Tell her we'll be right there, he said. Blanca nodded and left. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. What are you going to tell her? Kenneth asked quietly. Nothing, I said. Not yet. Not until I figure out how to explain that her father has been alive and wealthy and 30 minutes away for her entire life. He absorbed that like a physical blow. I want to know her, he said. I want to be part of her life. I'll respect whatever boundaries you set, but Evelyn, please don't shut me out. Not again. You shut yourself out, I reminded him. I know. And I'm asking for a second chance. He paused. Not with you. I know. I don't deserve that. But with her. Please. Let me try to be her father. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I didn't expect. Not arrogance, not entitlement, not the CEO used to getting his way. Just a man who'd realized too late what he'd lost, standing in the wreckage of his own choices and begging for a way to make it right. She deserves better than this, I said finally. She deserves the world, Kenneth agreed. And I'd like the chance to give it to her. We found Tanya on the main floor, surrounded by other scholarship recipients and foundation staff. She was laughing at something one of the other students said, her award still clutched in her hands, her face glowing with a happiness I hadn't seen in months. When she spotted us, she broke away from the group and rushed over. "Mom, there you are. Where did you go?" "Just talking to Mr. Wright," I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. "About the mentorship program." Tanya's eyes lit up even brighter, something I didn't think was possible. "Oh my God, Mom, did he tell you?" he said. She turned to Kenneth, almost bouncing with excitement. "Can I tell her?" Kenneth smiled, and despite everything, despite the anger and the hurt and the 14 years of silence, it was a real smile. A father's smile. He just didn't know it yet. "Go ahead," he said. Tanya grabbed my hands. "Mr. Wright wants to mentor me personally, not just through the foundation," he said. "I could come to the Wright Dynamics Robotics Lab every week. He said he wants to work with me one-on-one on my projects." "Mom, do you know what this means? This is everything I've been dreaming about." She hugged me, and over her shoulder, I met Kenneth's gaze. He was looking at Tanya like she was made of light. Like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for 14 years without knowing it. And I realized, with a sinking, terrifying clarity, that this wasn't going to be simple. That saying no would break my daughter's heart. That saying yes would mean letting Kenneth Wright back into our lives. That either way, nothing would ever be the same. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I heard myself say. And Kenneth's expression, grateful, desperate, hopeful, told me he understood exactly what that yes had cost me. Tanya pulled back, her smile wide enough to break me. "This is the best night of my entire life," she said. I pulled her close again and closed my eyes. "Just wait," I thought, "until you find out the man offering you the world is the father who never knew you existed. Then we'll see what the best night of your life really looks like." The mentorship sessions started the following Tuesday. I tried to delay it, tried to suggest we wait a few weeks, give Tanya time to settle into the idea, let the excitement cool down into something manageable. But my daughter had other plans. She spent the weekend researching Kenneth's patents, sketching out project ideas in notebooks she carried from room to room, talking nonstop about servo motors and artificial intelligence integration until I wanted to scream, not because she was annoying, because she was happy. Genuinely, radiantly happy in a way I hadn't been able to give her with our garage, workbench, and scavenged circuit boards. And watching her glow like that, knowing the source of that light was the man who'd once made me feel disposable, felt like swallowing glass. Kenneth sent a car for us. Not an Uber, not a rideshare. An actual car service, sleek and black, with leather seats that still had that new car smell, and a driver in a suit who opened the door for Tanya like she was royalty. She looked at me with eyes so wide I thought they might swallow her whole face. "Mom," she whispered, "this is insane. This is your father," I thought, "and you have no idea." "Enjoy it," I said, instead, sliding in beside her. The drive to Wright Dynamics headquarters took 20 minutes through downtown traffic. Tanya spent the entire time with her nose pressed against the window, watching the city slide past like she'd never seen it before. Maybe she hadn't. Not like this. Not from the inside of the life Kenneth had built while I was clipping coupons and working double shifts. Kenneth was waiting for us in the lobby. He ditched the three-piece suit for something slightly less intimidating, dark jeans, a gray button-down with the sleeves rolled up, expensive sneakers that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked younger this way, more like the man I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago, and less like the billionaire whose face graced magazine covers. But what stopped me cold was the expression on his face when he saw Tanya step out of the elevator. Pure, unfiltered joy. The kind of joy that comes from a place deeper than thought, more primal than logic. A father seeing his daughter, even if he didn't know the word for what he was feeling yet. "Tanya," he said, and his voice carried warmth I hadn't heard since the last time he'd said my name with love instead of regret. "Welcome to Wright Dynamics. I'm so glad you're here." Tanya shook his hand, professional and poised in a way that made my chest ache with pride. "Thank you so much for this opportunity, Mr. Wright. I promise I won't waste your time." Kenneth's expression softened even further. "Call me Kenneth, or Ken, if you prefer. And trust me, spending time with someone as brilliant as you could never be a waste." He said it with such sincerity that even I almost believed it. Then his eyes flicked to me, standing slightly behind Tanya, my arms crossed in a posture That probably screamed, "I don't want to be here." "Evelyn," he said quietly, "thank you for coming." The way he said it, like I'd granted him a gift instead of a parole hearing, made something twist uncomfortably in my stomach. "Tanya wanted to come," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "This is for her." "Not for you," I didn't say. "Never for you." But he heard it anyway. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the brief flash of pain before he buried it under that CEO composure. "Of course," he said. "Shall we head up to the lab?" The robotics lab occupied the entire 7th floor. The elevator doors opened onto a space that looked like it had been pulled straight from a science fiction film. Rows of workstations equipped with tools I couldn't name, robotic arms in various stages of assembly, 3D printers humming quietly in the corner, screens displaying code that scrolled past too fast to read, and engineers, dozens of them, bent over projects, talking in hushed clusters, moving through the space with the focused intensity of people doing work that mattered. Tanya stopped breathing. I watched her take it all in every detail, every possibility, and saw the exact moment she fell completely in love. She couldn't finish the sentence. Kenneth smiled. "This is where we build the future. And now it's yours too. Anything you see here, you have full access to. Any tool, any material, any expertise, it's available to you." Tanya turned to look at him, and I saw tears shimmering in her eyes. "Why me?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain in a way that broke my heart. "There were thousands of applicants. What made you choose me?" Kenneth was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because, when I read your application, when I saw what you'd built with almost nothing, just passion and determination and raw talent, I saw someone who reminded me of myself at your age. Someone who looks at the world and sees not what is, but what could be." He paused. "And because I believe in you, Tanya, completely." The way he said her name, gentle, reverent, like he was tasting it for the first time, made my throat close up. He meant it. Every word. And God help me, I could see him falling in love with her in real time. With the daughter he didn't know was his. With the pieces of himself and me woven together into someone entirely new. Kenneth gave Tanya a tour of the lab, explaining projects and introducing her to engineers who treated her like a colleague instead of a kid. And I watched. I stood back near the elevator, arms still crossed, trying to maintain the walls I'd built over 14 years, while watching them crumble with every smile Kenneth gave our daughter. Because I saw things he didn't know he was doing. The way he kept glancing at Tanya's hands when she gestured while talking, small, quick movements that were mine. My nervous habit, when I was excited about an idea. The way he tilted his head slightly when she asked questions, mirroring the exact angle she used without realizing it. The way he laughed at something she said, a real laugh, surprised and delighted, and the sound was so similar to hers that it made my stomach flip. Blood recognizing blood. Father finding daughter. Even if his conscious mind hadn't caught up yet. They ended up at a workstation in the corner, where Kenneth pulled up schematics on a large screen, something about adaptive AI in prosthetic limbs. Tanya leaned in close, her eyes scanning the designs with an intensity that shut out everything else. "The problem with current models," she said, speaking faster now, more confident, "is the feedback delay between neural input and mechanical response. But if you could create a predictive algorithm that anticipates movement intention before the signal completes, you'd reduce lag time by up to 40%, Kenneth finished, his eyes lighting up. "Exactly." Tanya turned to him, beaming. "Have you tested that?" "We're in early trials, but the neural prediction model needs work. The pattern recognition isn't sophisticated enough yet." Tanya bit her lip, thinking. Kenneth watched her do it, and something in his expression went soft. "That's my tell too. When I'm working through a problem, I bite my bottom lip the exact same way." He was seeing pieces of me in her, starting to understand what his heart already knew. "What if you introduced a learning algorithm that adapts to individual neural patterns over time?" Tanya asked. "Instead of trying to create one universal model, let the prosthetic learn the user's specific movement signatures." Kenneth stared at her. Then he pulled up another screen, fingers flying over the keyboard, pulling up lines of code. "That's actually brilliant," he said slowly. "It would require significant processing power. But if we use distributed computing across multiple nodes," he trailed off, lost in the problem. Tanya grinned. "I could write a prototype algorithm, if you want. I mean, If that's not too presumptuous, Tanya, Kenneth stopped typing and looked at her fully. I would be honored to see what you create. The way he said it, like she'd offered him something precious, made Tanya's grin widen into something incandescent. And I realized I was watching my daughter and her father solve problems together. Working in sync, speaking the same language, connecting on a level I could never reach because I didn't understand robotics and AI the way they did. I was watching the thing I'd been terrified of for 14 years. Kenneth and Tanya, finding each other. And the worst part? It was beautiful. You know what I've learned watching this unfold? Sometimes, the thing you've been protecting yourself from is also the thing that heals. The women who understand this, who've watched their carefully built walls come down brick by brick, you're the reason I keep telling this story. Because you know that growth doesn't happen in the safe places. It happens when we let people prove they've changed. If you're here because you're navigating your own version of this, wondering whether to trust again, you're not alone. Leave a comment if this resonates. Sometimes we just need to know someone else gets it. 2 hours passed like minutes. Engineers came and went, stopping to listen when Kenneth and Tanya's discussions got particularly animated. Someone brought coffee and pastries. Tanya ate 3 croissants without noticing, too absorbed in sketching circuit designs on a digital tablet Kenneth had handed her. And Kenneth watched her with an expression that made my chest physically hurt. Wonder, pride, something that looked an awful lot like love. He couldn't stop staring at her. Every time she turned away, his eyes would track the line of her profile. The way her hair fell across her forehead when she leaned forward, the animated gestures she made with her hands. Looking for pieces of himself, finding pieces of me. Trying to solve an equation his heart had already answered. When Blanca appeared to remind Kenneth of his next meeting, he looked genuinely disappointed. Already? He glanced at his watch and seemed surprised by what he found there. We've been at this for over 2 hours. Time flies when you're doing what you love, Tanya said, then immediately looked embarrassed. Sorry, that sounded cheesy. It sounded true, Kenneth said. He stood, reluctant to end the session. Same time next week? Absolutely, Tanya said. Kenneth turned to me then, and the question in his eyes was so vulnerable it almost undid me. Is this okay? Can I keep seeing her? Please don't take this away from me. I gave the smallest nod. His relief was palpable. In the car on the way home, Tanya wouldn't stop talking. Mom, did you see that haptic feedback system? And the way he explained the inverse kinematics algorithm, it made so much more sense than the YouTube videos I watched. And he listened to my ideas like they actually mattered. Like I wasn't just some kid playing around in her garage. Your ideas do matter, I said quietly. I know, but... She paused, searching for words. He treated me like an equal. Like a colleague. Like someone worth his time. Because you're his daughter, I thought. Because some part of him recognizes you even if he doesn't understand why yet. He seems really kind, Tanya continued, softer now. Like, genuinely kind. Not just doing it for PR kind. You can tell he actually cares. She turned to look at me, her green eyes, Kenneth's eyes, serious and searching. When you knew him before, was he always like that? My throat tightened. Yes, I admitted. When he wasn't building his empire. When he let himself just be human. Yes. He was kind. He was brilliant. He made you believe anything was possible. What happened? Tanya asked. Between you two? I couldn't tell her. Not yet. Life happened, I said. Different paths, different dreams. It wasn't exactly a lie. Just not the whole truth. Tanya was quiet for a moment, watching the city pass outside her window. Then she said, so quietly I almost missed it. He's the nicest CEO ever. I feel like I already know him. My heart stopped. What do you mean? She shrugged, still looking out the window. I don't know. It's weird. But when I'm talking to him, it doesn't feel like I'm talking to a stranger. It feels, she struggled for the word, familiar. Like coming home to a place you've never been before. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, could only sit there while my daughter described the biological pull between father and child, the recognition that happens below conscious thought, written into DNA, and carried forward through blood. She knew him. On some level, deeper than names or histories or the 14 years of separation, she knew him. And sooner or later, they'd both figure out why. 3 weeks became a routine I both dreaded and couldn't escape. Every Tuesday and Thursday, that black car would arrive at our apartment. Every session, Tanya would light up like someone had plugged her directly into a power source. And every time, I'd watch Kenneth look at our daughter with an expression that grew more tender, more protective, more fatherly with each passing day. He was falling in love with her. And she had no idea why it felt so natural. By the 4th week, Tanya had her own security badge and workstation. Kenneth cleared an entire corner of the lab for her projects, gave her access to equipment worth more than our entire apartment building, and told her to experiment fearlessly. She took him at his word. I'd arrive to pick her up and find them hunched over her latest prototype, their heads bent together at the same angle, speaking in a language of technical specifications and creative problem-solving that sounded almost like music. "If you offset the torque ratio here," Tanya would say, pointing at a schematic, "the stability improves, but you lose precision," Kenneth would counter. "Not if you add a secondary gyroscopic stabilizer. You'd need to compensate for the additional weight. Carbon fiber frame. Reduces mass by 60%. Kenneth would pause, look at her with something like awe, and say, "You're absolutely right." And every single time, I'd see him struggle not to pull her into a hug. The restraint was killing him. I could see it in the way his hands would twitch toward her when she got excited. The way he'd lean in when she talked, like he was afraid of missing a single word. The way his entire face transformed when she walked into the room like someone had turned on lights in a house that had been dark for years. He was her father. And some primal part of him knew it, even if his conscious mind was still catching up. Kenneth started finding excuses to talk to me. Little things at first, professional things. "Evelyn, do you mind if I schedule an extra session this week? Tanya's working on something for a national competition." "Evelyn, I'd like to arrange for Tanya to present at our annual Innovation Summit. With your permission." "Evelyn, would it be all right if I connected Tanya with some contacts at MIT? I think she'd benefit from their summer program." Always asking, always seeking permission. The Kenneth I'd known 15 years ago didn't ask permission for anything. He made decisions and expected the world to rearrange itself accordingly. This Kenneth, humbled, careful, desperate not to overstep, was someone I didn't know how to hate. And that terrified me. The conversations evolved. Started staying longer after Tanya left with Blanca for facility tours or meetings with other young engineers. Started moving from the lab to Kenneth's office, on the top floor, all glass walls and city views and furniture that cost more than I made in 6 months. We'd stand by the windows, the city spread out below us like a circuit board of lights, and talk about everything except the truth sitting between us like a live wire. Until one Thursday in late April when Kenneth finally touched it. "She has your stubbornness," he said quietly, watching Tanya through the glass wall as she argued with an engineer about proper solder technique. "That fire, that refusal to accept impossible as an answer. She gets that from necessity," I said. "When you grow up with nothing, you learn to fight for everything." Kenneth flinched. "Evelyn, I'm not saying it to hurt you. I'm stating a fact." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I think about it constantly. What those years were like for you. For her. What I missed. What I stole from all of us." "You didn't steal anything," I said, my voice flat. "You made a choice. There's a difference." "Is there?" He turned to face me fully, and the pain in his expression was so raw, it made me want to look away. Because from where I'm standing, I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me, and spent 14 years building an empire to avoid admitting how empty it felt. I wasn't prepared for that. For the honesty. For the crack in his armor that let me see straight through to the regret underneath. "Kenneth, I never stopped thinking about you," he said, and his voice dropped so low I almost didn't hear it. "I told myself I did, told myself I moved on. But every success, every milestone, every moment, I should have felt proud there was this voice in my head asking what you would think, if you'd be impressed, if you'd forgive me. And did you have an answer?" "No." He laughed bitterly. "I was too much of a coward to find out. I buried myself in work because it was easier than facing what I'd done. Easier than admitting I'd made the biggest mistake of my life and there was no algorithm to fix it. I should have felt vindicated. 14 years of wondering if he ever regretted it, if he ever looked back, if I'd meant anything at all, and here was my answer. But instead of satisfaction, I just felt tired. It doesn't matter anymore, I said quietly. It matters to me. Well, it shouldn't. I crossed my arms, armor back in place. You get to live with your choices, Kenneth. Just like I lived with mine. That's how consequences work. The following Tuesday, I brought the envelope. I didn't plan to. Didn't wake up that morning thinking, today's the day I show him. But I'd pulled it out the night before that check. That piece of paper that represented the worst moment of my life, and I couldn't stop staring at it. At his signature, at the amount, at the memo line where he'd written in his neat, precise handwriting, "Fresh start." As if $50,000 could erase a child. As if money could solve what his absence created. So I folded it back into its envelope, slipped it into my purse, and told myself I wouldn't give it to him. Right up until the moment I did. We were in his office again. Tanya was 3 floors down, working with an MIT graduate student on her competition entry. Kenneth was telling me about potentially sponsoring her for an international robotics competition in Tokyo. I'd cover all expenses, of course, and I'd make sure she has proper supervision. Stop, I said. Kenneth stopped mid-sentence. What's wrong? I reached into my purse, pulled out the envelope, and held it out to him. He stared at it like I was offering him a snake. What is that? Open it. His hands were shaking when he took it from me. I watched him slide his finger under the seal, still intact after 14 years, and pull out the check. The color drained from his face. Evelyn. His voice broke on my name. You really didn't. I really didn't. I kept my voice steady through sheer force of will. I couldn't. Every time I looked at it, all I could see was you choosing right dynamics over your own child. Kenneth sank into his chair, the check trembling in his hands. I thought you cashed it within days, he whispered. I thought when you never called, never came back. I thought the money was all you wanted. That I'd paid you off, and you were done with me. Is that what made it easier? I asked, and I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Believing I was that shallow, that mercenary? No, he looked up, and there were tears in his eyes. It made it unbearable, because even thinking you'd chosen money over me, he stopped, swallowed hard. I still loved you, and hated myself for losing you. The admission hung in the air between us. I didn't know what to do with it. Didn't know how to hold something that felt both like vindication and cruelty. You didn't lose me, I said finally. You pushed me away. There's a difference. I know. You handed me money and asked me to disappear. I know. You made me feel like I was a problem to be solved instead of a person you loved. I know. His voice shattered completely. And I have spent 14 years wishing I could take it back. Wishing I'd run after you. Wishing I'd chosen differently. But I can't, Evelyn. All I can do is, he stood, the check still clutched in his hand like evidence at a trial. All I can do is ask for a second chance. Not with you, I don't deserve that, but with her. With Tonya. Please. There it was. The question I'd been dreading since the moment he first looked at our daughter and saw something familiar in her eyes. Evelyn. He took a step closer, and I'd never seen him look so desperate. Please let me be part of her life. Let me be her father. I'll do it however you want, publicly, privately, whatever boundaries you need. But please don't shut me out. She deserves to know me. And his voice broke. I need to know her. Please. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man standing in the wreckage of his own choices, begging for a chance to build something new from the ruins. And I wanted to say yes. God help me. Part of me wanted to give him that chance. But the part of me that had survived 14 years alone, that had held Tanya through fevers and bad dreams and questions about why she didn't have a daddy like other kids, that part of me was cold and hard and unforgiving. This isn't about what you want, I said, each word deliberate and sharp. It's about what Tanya deserves. I know. She deserves a father who chooses her first, every single time, without hesitation. I will, Kenneth said desperately. I swear to you, Evelyn, I will choose her. Over everything. Over my company, my reputation, my comfort, I will put her first. Words are easy, I said. You said you loved me too, once, right before you paid me to leave. The blow landed. I saw it in the way he physically recoiled, the way his face crumpled. You're right, he whispered. I failed you, completely. But Evelyn. He looked at me with eyes that held 14 years of regret. Don't let my failure then rob her of a father now. Please. She deserves better than my mistakes. He was right. I hated that he was right. I need time, I said finally. How much time? I don't know. As much as I need to figure out how to tell my daughter that I've been lying to her for 14 years. That her father's been alive and successful and 30 minutes away while I let her believe he didn't exist. Kenneth's face twisted. You weren't lying. You were protecting her. From you, I said coldly. I was protecting her from you. The truth of it settled between us, like frost. And I walked out of his office with the empty envelope in my hand, leaving Kenneth alone with the uncashed check and the weight of everything it represented. I've come to understand something about forgiveness. It doesn't arrive all at once like people think it does. It comes in pieces, small decisions, moments when you choose to let someone try again. The women who've walked this path before me, who've had to decide whether to let someone back in, you're the ones who taught me that. That's the beauty of sharing these stories. We learn from each other's courage. If this story is speaking to you, if you're wrestling with your own version of second chances, hit that like button. It helps me know these stories matter. That we're not just entertaining each other, we're healing together. 6 weeks later, I realized I was losing her. Not literally, not in any way I could point to and say, there, that's the problem. But in small, undeniable ways that accumulated like water damage, invisible until the ceiling caves in. The way she started checking her phone for messages from Kenneth between our sessions. The way she'd light up when his name appeared on the screen, that same incandescent joy I used to think was reserved for me. The way she'd compare everything to what Ken says, or how Ken does it, until I wanted to scream. Ken. Not Mr. Right anymore, not Sir. Ken. Like they were old friends. Like he'd been there her whole life, instead of barely 2 months. It started innocently enough. Mr. Wright said the key to innovation is failing faster than anyone else, she'd say over dinner, pushing pasta around her plate while her mind was clearly still in that lab. Then it shifted. Ken thinks I should apply for the Siemens competition. He said he'd help me prepare. And eventually, Ken told me about this scholarship at Stanford. Full ride plus research stipend. He thinks I have a real shot. Ken thinks, Ken said, Ken believes. Every sentence felt like watching her slip further from my grasp, and into his orbit, the gravitational pull of a father she didn't know was hers, drawing her closer with every interaction. And the worst part? She was thriving. My daughter, who used to wake up anxious about whether we could afford new notebooks for school, now walked with her shoulders back and her head high. She spoke with confidence that came from someone believing in her so completely that she started believing in herself. Kenneth was giving her something I never could. Not just resources or opportunities, but the bone-deep certainty that she was extraordinary, that her dreams weren't just possible, they were inevitable. And I was terrified of what would happen when she learned the truth. When she discovered that the man who made her feel seen and valued and worthy was the same man who'd made me feel disposable. That her father had been here all along, 30 minutes away, building his empire while I built her. Would she forgive me for keeping them apart? Or would she look at me the way I used to look at my own mother, with that particular breed of teenage betrayal that cuts deeper than any other kind? Kenneth asked me to dinner on a Tuesday in early May. Not at some expensive restaurant where paparazzi might catch us. Not at Right Dynamics, where everything felt like a negotiation. At a small Italian place 3 blocks from my apartment, the kind of neighborhood spot where the owner knows everyone's order, and the tablecloths have wine stains from a decade of family dinners. We need to talk, he'd said. About Tanya, about the future. I almost said no. But something in his voice, urgency mixed with desperation, made me agree. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table away from the windows. He'd ditched the CEO armor again, jeans, a simple sweater, reading glasses I'd never seen him wear, perched on his nose while he studied the menu. He looked up when I approached, and the relief on his face was almost painful to witness. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing. "I wasn't sure you would. You said it was about Tanya." "It is." He waited until I sat before taking his own seat. "It's about all of us." A waiter appeared, took our orders, disappeared. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Kenneth spoke first. "She asked me yesterday if I have kids." My heart stopped. "What did you say?" I said no. He looked at me with eyes that held too much pain, and I watched her face fall, just a little. Like she'd been hoping for a different answer. Like maybe she was hoping. He stopped, swallowed hard. Evelyn, we can't keep doing this. Doing what? Pretending, lying, keeping her in the dark. He leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. She deserves to know the truth. She deserves to know I'm her father. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. Harsher. Kenneth's expression tightened. Why not? Because I'm not ready. When will you be ready? I don't know, I hissed, conscious of the other diners even as my voice rose. When I figure out how to tell my daughter that I lied to her for 14 years, when I figure out how to explain that her father, the man she's been worshiping for weeks, didn't want her, that he paid me to make her go away, that's not what happened. That's exactly what happened, I shot back. You gave me money and asked me to handle it. Those were your words, Kenneth. Let me handle this the only way I know how. What was I supposed to think? He looked like I'd struck him. You're right, he said quietly. You're right. But Evelyn, that man doesn't exist anymore. The man I was 15 years ago, so scared and selfish and stupid, I'd give anything to go back and do it differently. But I can't. All I can do is be better now. Be the father she deserves now. And what about what I deserve? I asked, and I hated how my voice shook. What about the 14 years I spent alone? The nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering how I was going to pay rent. The time she asked about her father, and I had to lie because the truth that he was alive and rich and couldn't be bothered would have destroyed her? I would have been there, Kenneth said desperately. If I'd known. But you didn't know. And that's my point. You didn't ask. You didn't check. You just assumed I'd done what you wanted and moved on with your life. The waiter appeared with our food. We both stared at our plates like we'd forgotten what eating was. After a long silence, Kenneth spoke again. I'm not trying to take her from you, he said quietly. I'm trying to be part of her life. Part of both your lives. But every day that passes without her knowing the truth, it gets harder. The lie gets bigger. And when she finds out, and she will find out, Evelyn, she's going to wonder why we waited, why we kept it from her. She'll hate me, I whispered. She'll forgive you. Because you're her mother. Because you've been there every single day of her life. Because you raised an extraordinary human being with nothing but love and sacrifice and determination. He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. But she might not forgive us for lying now. For letting her bond with me without knowing why it feels so natural. He was right. God, I hated that he was right. I need more time, I said. How much? I don't know. I'm not ready, Kenneth. Please. He pulled his hand back, and I saw resignation settle into his features. Okay, he said. But Evelyn, time doesn't make this easier. It just makes the explosion bigger when it finally happens. Tanya found the photo 3 days later. I didn't even know she was looking. Didn't know she'd gone into my closet searching for a dress to borrow for some school event. Didn't know that the shoebox I'd shoved onto the top shelf 14 years ago, the one filled with remnants of my old life, would choose that exact moment to become relevant again. I was folding laundry in the living room when she emerged from my bedroom, her face pale, holding a photograph in trembling hands. Mom? The tone of her voice made ice form in my veins. What's wrong, baby? She walked over slowly, like she was approaching something dangerous. I found this, she said. In a box in your closet. I was looking for that blue dress you wore to Aunt Marie's wedding, and I saw... She stopped. Swallowed hard. Mom? Is this you? She held out the photograph, and my entire world tilted sideways. It was me. 15 years ago, pregnant maybe 4 months along, barely showing, but undeniably there. I was standing in front of a building I barely remembered, wearing a sundress I'd loved once, smiling at whoever was taking the picture, and in the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakably present, was Kenneth. Younger, thinner, mid-laugh about something, together but separate. In the same frame but not quite touching, a snapshot of the life I'd lost before I even knew I'd had it. Yeah, I managed. That's me. You were pregnant. It wasn't a question. When was this taken? A long time ago. How long? I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except watch my daughter's brilliant mind Start putting together pieces I'd tried so hard to keep separate. 15 years ago, I whispered. Almost 16. Tanya's eyes widened. She looked at the photo again, then back at me. Mom, I'm 14. I know. So, you were pregnant with she stopped. Like saying it out loud would make it too real. With me? Yes. She stared at the photo for a long moment. Then her finger moved to the blurry figure in the background. Who is that? My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Just someone I knew back then. He looks familiar, Tanya said slowly. Like someone I've seen before. Recently. No, please, no, not like this. She looked up at me, and I saw the exact moment it clicked. The moment her world shifted on its axis the same way mine had 6 weeks ago when I saw Kenneth's name on that scholarship letter. Mom, her voice was barely a whisper. That's Kenneth. That's Ken. I couldn't deny it, couldn't lie, not when she was holding proof in her hands. Yes, I said. Tanya looked at the photo again, at my pregnant belly, at Kenneth in the background, at the timeline that no longer made sense, unless... She looked up at me with eyes that held the beginning of understanding and the end of everything I'd tried to protect her from. Mom, she said, and her voice shook. Mom, was Mr. right? She stopped, started again. Was Ken someone important to you? And I knew right then, standing in our living room with laundry half folded and my daughter holding evidence of the past, I'd buried that the truth I'd been running from for 14 years had finally caught up to us. There's something about the moment before everything changes, that breath you take right before the truth comes out. If you've been there, you know exactly what I mean. That split second where you can still go back, still keep pretending, but you know deep down it's already too late. The women in this community, we've all stood in that moment. Some of us chose to speak. Some of us waited until we had no choice. Either way, we understand each other. If this story is hitting close to home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes we find strength in knowing we're not the only ones carrying impossible truths. I called Kenneth from the bathroom, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Voice barely above a whisper because Tanya was still in the living room, sitting on the couch, staring at that photograph like it might spontaneously combust. He answered on the first ring. Evelyn? She knows, I said. Or she's figuring it out. She found a photo from before. You're in it. Kenneth. I don't know how to. I'm coming, he said immediately. Give me 20 minutes. Kenneth, she deserves the truth, Evelyn, from both of us, together. The line went dead. I stood in my bathroom, gripping the sink, staring at my reflection, and barely recognizing the woman looking back, pale, terrified, about to watch my daughter's entire world implode because I'd been too scared to tell the truth when it mattered. Those 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Tanya sat in silence, the photo still in her hands. She didn't ask more questions, didn't demand answers, just sat there doing the math, working through the implications, her brilliant mind arriving at a conclusion I could see forming behind her eyes. When the knock came at the door, we both jumped. I opened it to find Kenneth standing in our hallway, still in the clothes he'd worn to the office, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it the entire drive over. His eyes met mine. Is she? Living room, I whispered. He stepped inside, and I watched him see her, our daughter, sitting on our second-hand couch, holding proof of a past she'd never known existed. Tanya, he said softly. She looked up, and the expression on her face when she saw him nearly broke me. Confusion, hope, fear. The beginning of understanding. What are you doing here? She asked. Kenneth glanced at me. I nodded, though every instinct screamed to keep lying. Keep protecting. Keep pretending we could outrun the truth. Your mother called me, Kenneth said, because it's time you knew something we should have told you weeks ago. Tanya stood slowly, the photo still clutched in her hand. Knew what? I moved to stand beside Kenneth, and the three of us formed a triangle in my living room, mother, father, daughter, about to reshape our entire understanding of each other. Tanya, I began, and my voice cracked immediately. When I knew Kenneth 15 years ago, we were together. We were in love. And when I got pregnant, with me, Tanya whispered. With you, I confirmed, I told him. And I couldn't finish. Kenneth stepped forward. I panicked. I was 29 years old, trying to build a company, and I was terrified. So I gave your mother money and asked her to." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I thought she was going to end the pregnancy, and when she left and never came back, I believed that's what happened. I believed I'd paid for an abortion and lost the only woman I'd ever loved because I was too selfish and scared to be a father." Tanya was shaking her head, backing away from both of us. "No," she said. "No, you're saying you're telling me. Kenneth is your father," I said, and the words felt like pulling glass from a wound. "He didn't know you existed until 6 weeks ago. When you won that scholarship. When he saw you for the first time." The color drained from Tanya's face. "You're lying," she whispered. "I'm not, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. But you're lying." Her voice cracked into a scream that made both of us flinch. This is insane. You're telling me that Ken, that Mr. Right, that he's my father and nobody thought to mention this?" "Tanya, please," Kenneth started. "Don't." She held up a hand, tears streaming down her face now. "Don't you dare. You don't get to." She turned to me, and the betrayal in her eyes was worse than any punishment I could imagine. "You lied to me. My entire life, you lied to me. Every time I asked about my dad. Every time I wondered why I didn't have one. Every time I felt different from other kids you knew. You knew where he was, and you never told me. I was protecting you. From what? From having a father? From having someone who," she gestured wildly at Kenneth, "who actually gives a damn about me, who believes in me, who makes me feel like I matter." Each word was a knife. "You do matter," I said desperately. "You've always mattered. You're everything to me, Tanya. I did what I thought was right." "Well, you thought wrong." She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. "You took him away from me. Both of you. You." She looked at Kenneth, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "You paid her to get rid of me?" "No," Kenneth said, his voice breaking. "God, no, Tanya. I didn't know, I thought. And you." She spun back to me. "You let me spend 14 years thinking I wasn't wanted. That my father didn't care enough to stick around. When he was right here, when he was..." Her voice dissolved into sobs. She ran straight past both of us, out of the apartment, her footsteps echoing in the stairwell as she fled. I moved to follow, but Kenneth caught my arm. "Let me," he said. "Kenneth, please, let me talk to her. Let me try." I wanted to say no, wanted to chase after my daughter myself, but something in Kenneth's face, the desperation, the determination, the raw need to make this right, made me step aside. He ran after her, and I collapsed onto the couch and finally let myself break. Kenneth found her in the parking lot of Right Dynamics. He told me this later, his voice hollow with emotion, sitting across from me in that same living room hours after our world imploded. She'd taken a ride share, used the app on her phone and the credit card I'd given her for emergencies, and gone straight to the one place that had felt safe these past 6 weeks. The robotics lab. Her sanctuary. The place where her father had been all along, even though neither of them knew it. Kenneth said he found her in the corner of the lab, sitting on the floor next to her workstation, knees pulled to her chest, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. He didn't approach immediately. Just stood in the doorway, watching his daughter, the child he'd never known existed, fall apart because of choices he'd made 15 years ago. Then he walked over slowly, carefully, like approaching something precious and breakable. "Tanya," he said softly. She looked up, her face blotchy and tear-stained and so young it made his chest physically hurt. "Go away," she whispered. "I can't," he said. "Not anymore. Not ever again." He sat down beside her on the floor, this billionaire CEO in his expensive clothes, sitting on the concrete floor of his own lab because his daughter needed him there. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "And I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't fix the 14 years I missed. But Tanya, I swear to you if I had known, everything would have been different." "How?" she asked bitterly. "How would it have been different? You didn't want a kid. You paid my mom to make me disappear." "I was wrong," Kenneth said, and his voice broke. "I was 29 years old and terrified and so focused on building my company that I couldn't see past my own fear. And I made the worst decision of my entire life. I asked your mother to end the pregnancy. I thought she did. And I spent 14 years living with that guilt, that regret, that knowledge that I destroyed something precious, because I was too much of a coward to be what you both needed. Tanya was crying again, silent tears streaming down her face. But you didn't know about me, she whispered. This whole time, you didn't know I existed? Not until I saw you at that scholarship ceremony, Kenneth said. The moment I looked at you, something in me recognized you. I didn't understand it then. But my heart knew before my brain did. You're my daughter. And meeting you, knowing you, watching you, create and dream and become this extraordinary person, it's been the greatest gift of my life. You don't get to say that, Tanya said. But there was less anger in her voice now, just pain. You don't get to just show up and be my dad and act like everything's fine. You're right, Kenneth agreed. I don't. I have to earn it. I have to prove that I'm not the scared 29-year-old who made the worst choice of his life. I have to show you, every single day, that you matter, that you're wanted, that you're loved. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with tears. I can't change the past, Tanya. I can't give you back the years I missed. But I can promise you this. From now on, for the rest of my life, I will choose you. Over my company, my reputation, my comfort, I will choose you. Always. Tanya made a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. I always wondered why I didn't have a dad, she whispered. Every Father's Day. Every time my friends talked about their dads. Every time I saw families together and wondered what was wrong with me. Why I wasn't good enough to keep. Kenneth's face crumpled. Nothing was wrong with you, he said fiercely. Nothing. You are perfect. You are extraordinary. And the fact that I didn't know you, didn't get to raise you, didn't get to be there for your first steps and your first words and your first robot, that's my loss. My failure, not yours. Never yours. Tanya turned to look at him fully for the first time. You really didn't know? I really didn't know. And you want to be my dad? Like, actually? More than I've ever wanted anything, Kenneth said. If you'll let me. If you'll give me a chance to earn it. For a long moment, Tanya just stared at him. Then, slowly, tentatively, she leaned into his shoulder. And Kenneth wrapped his arms around his daughter for the first time, holding her while she cried, whispering apologies and promises into her hair. Father and daughter. Finally. He called me an hour later. She's okay, he said. We're okay. Or we're going to be. Where is she? Right here. She wants to talk to you. There was rustling, and then Tanya's voice, small and tired and young. Mom? Baby? I'm so sorry. Can you come get us? She asked. I'm not ready to come home yet. But I want all of us to talk. Together. Please? I was already grabbing my keys. I'm on my way. When I arrived at Right Dynamics, I found them in the lab together. Kenneth and Tanya, sitting side by side at her workstation, not working on anything, just sitting. His arm was around her shoulders. Her head rested against his side. They looked up when I entered, and the tableau they made, father and daughter, together at last, nearly brought me to my knees. Tanya stood and walked to me slowly. I'm still mad at you, she said. I know. You should have told me. I know. But I understand why you didn't. She took a shaky breath. He told me everything. What happened, what he thought, why you left. And Mom, her voice broke. You raised me by yourself. You gave up everything. You protected me even when it hurt. I couldn't speak, could only pull her into a hug and hold on while she cried into my shoulder. Over her head, I met Kenneth's gaze. He mouthed 2 words, thank you. For raising her. For protecting her. For creating the extraordinary human being he just discovered was his. And for the first time in 14 years, I thought maybe we could find a way forward. All 3 of us. Together. The first month was awkward. Not bad, not hostile, just strange in the way that rebuilding something broken always is. You can see where the cracks were, even after you've glued the pieces back together. Kenneth showed up for everything. And I mean everything. Tanya had a robotics club meeting at school. Kenneth was there, sitting in the back row with the other parents, looking completely out of place in his expensive suit, but refusing to leave. She had a competition 3 hours away on a Saturday morning. Kenneth drove us, stopped for coffee and donuts on the way, and spent the entire day in a high school gymnasium cheering louder than anyone else when Tanya's robot completed its task. Late-night coding session that ran past midnight. Kenneth ordered pizza, rolled up his sleeves, and debugged code alongside her until both of them were bleary-eyed and laughing at syntax errors. He showed up every single time, without fail, without excuses, without letting his billion-dollar company get in the way. And slowly, painfully slowly, like watching ice melt in February, Tanya started to soften. The transition happened in stages. First, she started texting him. Small things, questions about projects, links to articles, the occasional meme about engineering that made him laugh so hard he'd show me his phone like a proud parent. Which, I suppose, he was. Then she started calling him when she needed advice. Not just about robotics, about school, about friends, about the kind of everyday problems that fathers are supposed to help solve. Ken says I should talk to my teacher directly, instead of just accepting the bad grade, she'd tell me over dinner. Ken thinks I should try out for the math team, even though I'm nervous. Ken said he was terrified of public speaking when he was my age, but he got better with practice. Ken. Always Ken. Not Dad. Not yet. But the foundation was being laid. Brick by careful brick. Then came the night Tanya had a nightmare. I heard her crying through the wall, that particular sound that every mother knows, the one that bypasses your brain and goes straight to your instincts. I was halfway to her room when I realized Kenneth was already there. He'd started staying over sometimes, in the guest room, when late-night work sessions ran too long, or when Tanya wanted to watch a movie with both of us, making up for lost time, one awkward family dinner at a time. I stopped in the hallway and listened. "Hey, sweetheart," Kenneth's voice, soft and soothing. "You're okay, I'm right here." "I dreamed you left again," Tanya sobbed. "I dreamed you decided you didn't want to be my dad anymore, and you just disappeared." The sound Kenneth made was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "Listen to me, Tanya. Look at me." Silence. "I am never leaving. Do you understand? Never. You could tell me to leave, and I'd still find ways to be in your life. You're stuck with me now, for good. Promise?" "I promise, on everything I have, everything I am, I promise." I heard movement. A hug, probably. Then Tanya's voice, small and tentative. Can I call you Dad?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then Kenneth's voice, thick with tears. "I would be honored." I leaned against the hallway wall and cried as quietly as I could. Because my daughter had just gotten her father back, and despite everything, despite the pain and the lies and the 14 years of absence, I was glad. Kenneth started looking at me differently. Not like he used to, back when we were young and reckless, and convinced we could rewrite the rules. Softer than that. Deeper. Like he was seeing me for the first time and realizing exactly what I'd done, what I'd sacrificed, what I'd built from the ashes of what he'd destroyed. We were in my kitchen on a Tuesday evening. Tanya was at a friend's house working on a group project, and Kenneth was helping me with dishes, because that's what he did now. Showed up, helped, made himself part of the domestic fabric of our lives. "You raised an extraordinary human being," he said quietly, handing me a plate to dry. "We've established that." "No, I mean," he stopped, searching for words. "Evelyn, what you did. Alone. With no help. You took the worst moment of your life and turned it into the best thing in mine. You created this brilliant, kind, passionate person who somehow doesn't hate me, even though she has every right to." "She doesn't hate you because you're showing up," I said. "Because you're proving every day that you're not the man who walked away. Because you taught her forgiveness," Kenneth corrected. "You taught her grace. You could have poisoned her against me, told her I was a monster, made it impossible for us to have a relationship, but you didn't." "I thought about it," I admitted. He smiled sadly. "I know. I would have deserved it." We finished the dishes in silence. But when I turned to put away the last plate, Kenneth was standing closer than before. "Evelyn," he said. And my name in his voice still did things to me I didn't want to acknowledge. "I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know what I did is unforgivable. But don't," I said. "Please, just let me say this." He took a breath. "I want a second chance. With Tanya, yes. But also with you. I want us to be a family. A real family. Not just two people co-parenting. I want I can't, I interrupted, and I heard my voice shake. Kenneth, I can't go through that again. I can't trust you with my heart when you've already proven you'll choose ambition over love. I was 29 and stupid. And now you're 44 and still running an empire. I shot back. What happens the next time Right Dynamics needs you? The next time there's a crisis or an opportunity or a board meeting that matters more than— Nothing matters more than you. He said it with such fierce certainty that it stopped me cold. Nothing. Not my company, not my reputation, not my legacy. I spent 14 years building an empire to fill the hole you left. And now that I have you back, now that I have both of you back, I will burn it all down before I lose you again. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly it physically hurt. But I'd believed him before. I need time, I whispered. Kenneth nodded, stepped back, gave me space. I'll wait, he said, as long as it takes. 3 months after the truth came out, Tanya won the National Robotics Championship. We were in Boston. The three of us, Kenneth, had chartered a private plane because commercial flights don't have enough legroom for last-minute code adjustments. The competition was fierce. Teams from across the country with funding and resources we'd never dreamed of. But Tanya was brilliant. And when her robot completed the final challenge navigating an obstacle course, identifying objects, and assembling them into a specific configuration, the crowd erupted. She'd won. My daughter had won the national championship. The interview happened fast, reporters swarming, cameras flashing. Someone shoving a microphone in Tanya's face while she was still buzzing with adrenaline and disbelief. Tanya Lashley, congratulations. Tell us, who do you want to thank for this incredible victory? Tanya looked directly into the camera. My mom, she said, and I felt tears prick my eyes. Who taught me that anything is possible if you work hard enough? And my dad, she turned, found Kenneth in the crowd, smiled that incandescent smile. Who showed me what's possible when someone believes in you completely? My dad. She'd said it. On camera, in front of reporters, in front of the world. Kenneth looked like he'd been struck by lightning. The media explosion happened within hours. Billionaire CEO Kenneth Wright has a secret daughter. Tech mogul reunited with one 4-year-old daughter after shock discovery. The Wright dynasty heir. Meet Tanya Lashley. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters camped outside our apartment. Wright Dynamics' PR team went into overdrive. And Kenneth? Kenneth became a wall between the chaos and his daughter. He issued a statement that was brief and protective. I recently learned I have a daughter, and she is the greatest blessing of my life. We ask for privacy as we navigate this new chapter as a family. He hired security to keep reporters away from our building. Had his legal team draft cease and desist letters to anyone who tried to photograph Tanya without permission. Threatened to sue 3 publications that attempted to dig into our past. When one tabloid tracked down Tanya's school and tried to interview her classmates, Kenneth showed up personally. I got the call from the principal. Miss Lashley, Mr. Wright is here, and he's making it very clear that any further contact with Tanya will result in legal action. I drove to the school, expecting to do damage control. Instead, I found Kenneth in the principal's office, calm but immovable, explaining in the kind of voice that built empires that his daughter's privacy was non-negotiable. She's 14 years old, he was saying. She didn't ask for this attention, and anyone who attempts to exploit her for headlines will discover exactly how protective I can be. The principal nodded rapidly. Of course, Mr. Wright. We'll make sure. Thank you. Kenneth stood, shook her hand, and turned to find me standing in the doorway. His expression softened immediately. Evelyn, I hope this was okay. I couldn't stand the thought of her being harassed at school. I looked at this man, this billionaire CEO, who'd once been too scared to be a father, standing in a principal's office, like a shield between the world and his daughter. And something inside me shifted. Thank you, I said quietly. Kenneth's eyes searched mine. Always. For both of you. Always. Here's what I've learned about watching someone change. Actions speak louder than promises. Always. The women who've had to decide whether someone deserves a second chance, you know what I'm talking about. You watch. You wait. You look for patterns, not just words. And when you finally see someone show up, day after day, proving they're different, that's when healing becomes possible. If you've been on this journey with me, if you're rooting for second chances, or maybe wrestling with whether to give one yourself, subscribe. Because these stories, they don't end here. There's so much more to tell, and I want you with me for all of it. That night, after Tonya went to bed, Kenneth and I sat on my balcony, too small, a little run down, but with a view of the city that reminded us both of how far we'd come. "You've changed," I said. "So have you." "No, I struggled for the words. The man I knew 15 years ago wouldn't have done what you did today. He would have had his PR team handle it, stayed at the office, let someone else deal with the messy parts." Kenneth was quiet for a long moment. "The man you knew 15 years ago was a coward," he said finally. "He let fear drive every decision. He chose safety over love. And he lost everything that mattered because of it." He turned to look at me. "I'm not that man anymore, Evelyn. I don't want to be. I'm starting to see that." "Does that mean?" I held up a hand. "It means I'm starting to see it, that's all, for now." Kenneth smiled. Small, but real. "For now is enough." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights, and I thought about second chances. About whether people really change. About whether the man who broke my heart could become the man who mended it. I didn't have answers yet, but for the first time in 14 years, I had hope. If you've ever waited for the other shoe to drop for so long that silence feels louder than disaster, you understand those next few months of my life. On paper, things were good. Tonya had a father who showed up, a mentor who believed in her, a billionaire CEO who became the man hovering at the back of school auditoriums, clapping too loudly and pretending not to wipe his eyes. From the outside, we looked almost whole. But inside me, there was a crack I couldn't smooth over. A place that still remembered standing in his penthouse 14 years ago, fingers digging into an envelope that felt heavier than it looked, realizing the man I loved trusted money more than he trusted us. Trust is funny like that. It doesn't care how many times he shows up now. It remembers the one time he didn't. The night everything came to a head, it was raining. Not a romantic drizzle. A hard, relentless downpour hammering against my kitchen window while I stood at the sink, staring at the city lights smeared by water. Kenneth was at the table with Tonya, both of them hunched over her laptop, running simulations for the International Youth Robotics Championship. She'd qualified. Of course she had. Her robot, sleeker, smarter, fiercer than anything she'd built before, was heading to the biggest competition of her life. And somehow, the three of us were heading into the biggest decision of mine. "Run it again," Kenneth said. "Watch the response delay after the third obstacle." Tonya typed, watched the numbers scroll, nodded. "You were right, Dad. There's a dip at 2.4 seconds. I can fix it." She said it so casually now, Dad, like the word had always belonged to him. In a way, it had. He just arrived late to claim it. After Tonya finally closed her laptop and shuffled off to bed, mumbling about sensor calibration in her sleep, I started packing up the kitchen. Kenneth stayed seated, watching me. He did that a lot now. Watched, waited, gave me space like a man who'd learned what happened when he rushed. "You're quiet tonight," he said. "I'm thinking." "Dangerous," he teased gently. I didn't smile. He noticed. The joking light in his eyes dimmed. "Talk to me, Evelyn." I dried my hands on a towel and leaned back against the counter. Putting distance between us, I wasn't sure I could afford anymore. "You keep showing up," I said. "Every practice, every meeting, every late-night code marathon. You handle the press. You protect her. You rearrange your schedule like her life is your top priority." "She is," he said simply. "I know." I took a breath. "That's what scares me." He frowned. "I don't understand." I met his eyes. "Because I believe you." The admission seemed to stun him. "For the first time in 14 years, I continued, "I believe you when you say you're not going anywhere. And that terrifies me, Kenneth. Because if I let myself lean on you and you change your mind, I don't know if I can survive watching you walk away twice." He stood slowly, like any sudden movement might spook me. "I didn't just lose a child," he said, voice low, almost rough. "I lost you." The first time, I was too arrogant to understand what that meant. I told myself work would fill the gap. It didn't. It just made the emptiness quieter. He stepped closer. but not close enough to touch. I won't ruin this twice. Not with her. Not with you. I can't undo what I did, but I can spend whatever time I have left proving I learned from it." His words hung in the humid kitchen air, heavy as the storm outside. "Tanya asked me something last week," I said. "She caught me washing dishes and just dropped it like it was nothing." "What did she ask?" "If we could be a family now." His breath caught. "What did you say?" "I told her we're already a family," I said. "Because we are, in this messy, half-finished way." But she meant something else, Kenneth. She meant all in. No backup exits. No just co-parent safety net. She meant us. "And you?" I didn't have an answer. The answer came 3 days later. Not in some grand, cinematic epiphany. In a gymnasium that smelled like cold metal and teenage nerves, under fluorescent lights that made everyone look a little tired. The International Youth Robotics Championship. Teams from all over the world, flags hanging from the rafters, commentators narrating every move like it was the final lap at the Olympics. Tanya stood by her robot, sleek silver, graceful, lethal in the calm, precise way it moved. Her hair was pulled back, her hands were steady. She looked like she belonged there. Kenneth stood beside me in the stands, one hand braced on the rail, knuckles white. "If she wins," he murmured, "she'll have offers from every school on the planet. She'll build her own school if she wants to," I said. He smiled. "Of course she will." The final challenge began. Obstacle course, object identification, assembly sequence under time pressure, the kind of task that would make most adults sweat. Tanya's robot moved through it like it had been born for this. When the final buzzer sounded and her score flashed on the giant screen higher than every other competitor's, the stadium erupted. She'd won. Again. My daughter, our daughter, national champion, international champion, future she'd built with spit, wire, and a stubborn refusal to quit. The announcer called her to the stage. She walked out to the center, all bright lights and roaring applause, and for half a second, she looked over her shoulder. At us. At me and Kenneth. She didn't have to say anything. The question was clear in that brief, searching look. "Are you with me?" We were. We walked down together, pushing through the crowd of parents and coaches, and stopped at the base of the stage as she accepted her trophy, a gleaming metal sculpture shaped like a circuit, reflecting spotlights and camera flashes. The interviewer stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Tanya Lashley," he called, voice booming through the speakers. "Two-time champion and now international winner. How does it feel?" Tanya's eyes scanned the crowd until she found us. Her smile softened, something private and precious underneath the public glow. "It feels like I'm not alone," she said. The interviewer laughed. "You've got quite a support section over there. Who's here with you?" She took a breath. "My mom," she said, gesturing toward me, "who raised me and believed in me when all I had was a garage and secondhand parts." The camera followed her hand. I felt the audience's eyes on me. "And my dad," Tanya continued, turning toward Kenneth, "who found me late but decided to show up early for everything since." A ripple of reaction moved through the crowd. Kenneth went very still. "My dad." She'd said it again. On a bigger stage, to a bigger world. The interviewer grinned. "Care to join her up here?" It wasn't in the program. But some moments refused to stay off script. Tanya looked at us, holding out a hand. "Please?" Kenneth looked at me. Every fear I'd carried for 14 years lined up in my chest, demanding to be heard. What if he leaves again? What if she blames you if it goes wrong? What if this isn't real? And then another voice cut through the noise. What if this is your second chance, and you're too scared to take it? I took his hand. His fingers tightened around mine, warm and solid and shaking just a little. We stepped onto the stage together. The three of us, mother, father, daughter, a family, imperfect, bruised, finally standing in the same light. I want to tell you something I've learned through all of this. Healing isn't a destination. It's a choice you make every single day. To trust again, to hope again, to believe that people can change and futures can be rewritten. The women who've walked this path with me, who've shared their own stories in the comments, who've held space for each other's second chances, you're the reason I keep showing up here. You're building something beautiful. A community where complicated stories get honored instead of judged. If this resonates with you, If you see yourself in any part of this journey, I'd love for you to be part of this family. Subscribe, comment, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because the stories that heal us, they're meant to be passed on. Later that night, after photos and interviews and a blur of congratulations, we ended up back at my apartment. Tanya fell asleep on the couch, trophy on the coffee table, robot safely tucked in its case nearby, like a beloved pet. Kenneth and I stood in the doorway, watching her. "She's going to change the world," he said quietly. "She already changed ours," I replied. He turned to me, and there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen in a very long time. Not just love, resolve. "I meant what I said," he murmured. "At your sink. At the school. Every time I've promised her. I'm not leaving." He paused, swallowing hard. "I didn't just lose a child, Evelyn. I lost the woman who made the idea of a child even make sense. I lost you. I won't ruin this twice. I can't." I studied his face, the lines that hadn't been there 15 years ago, the silver at his temples, the weariness of a man who'd built an empire and realized it wasn't enough. And I realized something. He wasn't asking me to trust the boy he used to be. He was asking me to trust the man standing in front of me now, battle-scarred and humbled, with his heart in his hands. "I need to show you something," I said. I went to my room, reached into the back of my drawer, and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside it were scraps of paper. The check, or what used to be the check. I'd shredded it the night before the championship. Sat at my kitchen table, fed it through a cheap shredder one strip at a time, listening to the sound of a past I'd clung to for too long being turned into confetti. Now, I poured those strips into his hand. He looked down, stunned. "You destroyed it?" "I don't need it anymore," I said. "I spent 14 years letting this piece of paper define us, define you, define what I thought we were worth to you." I closed his fingers around the shredded remains. "I'm done disappearing, Kenneth. If you want this family, you fight for it. Every day. Not with money, not with grand gestures, with showing up, with staying." His throat worked around a wordless sound. Then, quietly, "I already am." He didn't reach for me. He didn't try to kiss me. He just stood there, holding the shredded check like a relic of an old religion he'd stopped believing in, and let the silence between us fill with something new. Not perfection. Not a fairy tale. A possibility. Weeks later, Tanya would joke that her favorite invention wasn't the award-winning robot, or the predictive algorithm, or the adaptive prosthetic design. It was the reboot, she'd say, grinning as she watched me and Kenneth bicker over who made better coffee. The moment my parents realized version 2 might actually work. We're still debugging. We still argue. We still wake up some mornings and flinch at old ghosts. But now, when fear shows up, it finds 3 of us instead of 1. And when I look at my daughter on a stage, my hand in the hand of the man who once paid me to disappear and now chooses us, daily, over everything else, I realize this is the only cash out that ever really mattered. Not the check. Not the empire. The second chance, we decided, finally, to cash together,